Tolbert,
Yes. Or here.
Naker,
Here.
Tao,
Here.
Prince,
Here.
Jalali,
Here.
Yang,
Here.
Council President Brenmon.
Here.
7 present, no one absent.
Please stand and join Councilmember Tolbert in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Consent agenda items 4 through 23 are before you for your consideration.
We are pulling item number 9 off the consent agenda. Are there other items that should be taken separately? All right, seeing none, Mr. Tao moves the balance of the consent agenda. Roll call.
Tolbert,
Yes.
Naker,
Aye.
Tao, Councilmember, you must be on mute. I'll come back. Prince,
Aye.
Jalali,
Aye.
Yang, aye. Council President Brenmon,
Aye.
and Councilmember Tao.
Aye.
7 in favor, no one opposed. The consent agenda is adopted as amended. Resolution 20-1664, authorizing the Department of Parks and Recreation to apply for grant funds of $5,000 from the Walmart Local Community Grant Fund to support the McDonough Girls and Women in Sports Project.
And this item, I'm just requesting a 1-week layover. I am fully supportive and love this program and support the request for grant funding, but we just had to fill out a few more legal forms before we could go ahead with this. So just a 1-week layover so we can finish those details. Any discussion on my motion? Seeing none, roll call.
Tolbert,
Yes.
Baker,
Aye.
Tao,
Aye.
Prince,
Aye.
Jalali,
Aye.
Yang, Councilmember Yang,
Aye.
Council President Brenmon.
Aye.
7 in favor, none opposed. The resolution is laid over to December 16th. Item number 24, resolution public hearing 20-261, approving the petition of Christiana Hang on behalf of the Hmong Education Reform Company to vacate air rights over Brewster Street in the north half of the northwest quarter of Section 27.
And on this item, we ultimately laid the item over after mistakenly not recognizing that we needed 5 votes for it to pass. It went through with 4, but it did not pass, so we recalled it and ultimately laid it over for more information. I will say, just for the sake of my colleagues' information, that I know that at the meeting I had discussed the possibility of voting against this Skyway airspace. But I do believe that I've come around in support, and primarily because one of the things that I've been saying as we talk about our conduit bonds and charter schools, is that I really believe that the schools need to be partnering with us earlier in the process, because it's frustrating to me when a project is completed and then schools ask us to make traffic improvements, make park improvements, and don't have those things included in their initial plan. And on this item, I'm getting a strange echo.
Yeah.
Did someone just join our meeting? Okay. But on this item, the school did come up with a solution for traffic in front of their school that connects their main campus to their new to the middle school space, without relying on the city and without jumping in line in terms of where we make those investments. And so it won't deprioritize any of the other schools we have waiting for safe routes to school work or other of improvements that we have in the queue. And I also recognize that this part of the project did not qualify under the conduit bonds. It is separate and was separately and privately fundraised to fund the project. So I just would like to start out by saying that I will be voting in support of this for those reasons. And just a reminder that in order for this to pass, it would need 5 votes. I don't know if council members, we did get some information this week from the school. I don't know if folks are looking for more information or if we're ready to take this to a vote. I see Mr. Tao, Ms. Prince, Ms. Naker, and I would just, if anyone is looking for a report, I'm looking at your faces, or if you just have comments to make. Just comments? Okay, let's start with Mr. Tao, then Ms. Naker, then Ms. Prince.
Thank you, Council President. I just want to recognize your thoughtful due diligence in looking over this. And I think the point that I want to emphasize here is that this is this skyway is for safety of the kids and faculty crossing. Well, the important thing here is that they're not using city dollars. They're finding private dollar to do this. A bump out is very expensive. Putting light there is very expensive. Putting a stop sign, it's expensive. And then we have to maintain that on an ongoing expense to us. And so if they're willing to take the initiative to do this, it's good for the city and it's good for their infrastructure and their school. And so I'm ready to support this as well.
Thank you, Mr. Tao. Ms. Naker.
Thanks, Council President. I fully agree with Councilmember Tao, and I really want us to be cautious about government overreach here. It seems to me that we have a very clear delineation of what is and isn't allowed in our zoning code, and beyond that, we really don't get to tell applicants or private property owners what features we do or don't want them to put on their property. In this case, I think we've seen compelling testimony from the school that this is absolutely a student's safety issue. But honestly, even if it weren't, I think this is privately funded, as Councilmember Tao pointed out, and it's within our code. So I think our ability to weigh in one way or another on this and stop this from happening would really be, I think, going beyond the bounds of what we're here to do.
Thank you, Ms. Naker. Ms. Prince?
I had voted against this item last week because I had voted against the conduit bond issue and in an effort to be consistent. Had I known that it required a 5-2 vote, I probably would have voted in support of it. I am more inclined to vote in support of it now, knowing that it is not part of the conduit bond project that that was financed, that takes my rationale out altogether. And so I will vote in support of the vacation.
All right. Thank you, Ms. Prince. Is there any further discussion before we take this item to a vote? And Mr. Tao, I think, is your hand still up from earlier, or did you have a second comment? Still up. Okay, just checking. All right. Looking at my colleagues, I do not see that there's further comments. So seeing no further comment, Ms. Naker moves approval. Roll call.
Tolbert,
Yes.
Naker,
Aye.
Tao,
Aye.
Prince,
Aye.
Jalali,
No.
Yang,
No.
Council President Redmond.
Yes.
5 in favor, 2 opposed, those being council members Jalali and Yang. The resolution is adopted. Item 25, resolution public hearing 20-249, setting the city recycling service fee for 2021 and authorizing Public Works to request $740,709 in SCORE-based grant and $48,200 in SCORE incentive grant funds from Ramsey County to support the residential recycling program and additional waste diversions initiatives. This public hearing was held on November 4th.
All right, this is in front of us for a final vote. Any discussion on this item? Seeing none, Ms. Naker moves approval. Roll call.
Tolbert,
Yes.
Naker,
Aye.
Tao,
Aye.
Prince,
Aye.
Jalali,
Aye.
Yang,
Aye.
Council President Brenmon.
Aye.
7 in favor, no one opposed. The resolution is adopted. Item 26, resolution public hearing 20-242, setting the solid waste service fee for 2021. And this public hearing was held on November 4th.
Mr. Tao moves approval on this item. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, roll call.
Tolbert,
Yes.
Naker,
Aye.
Tao,
Aye.
Prince,
Aye.
Jalali,
Aye.
Yang,
Aye.
Council President Brenmon.
Aye.
7 in favor, no one opposed. The resolution is adopted. Item 27, resolution public hearing 20-252, setting the 2021 sanitary sewer and storm sewer rates. And this public hearing was held on November 4th.
And Mr. Tolbert moves approval. Any discussion on that motion? Seeing none, roll call.
Tolbert,
Yes.
Naker,
Aye.
Tao,
Aye.
Prince,
Aye.
Jalali,
Aye.
Yang,
Aye.
Council President Brenmon.
Aye.
7 in favor, no one opposed. The resolution is adopted. Item 28, resolution public hearing 20-225, establishing the water charges for 2021. And this public hearing was held on November 4th.
Ms. Yang moves approval. Any discussion on that motion? Seeing none, roll call.
Tolbert,
Yes.
Naker,
Aye.
Tao,
Aye.
Prince,
Aye.
Jalali,
Aye.
Yang,
Aye.
Council President Brenmon.
Aye.
7 in favor, no one opposed. The resolution is adopted. Item 29, resolution 20-1667, approving the St. Paul Regional Water Services 2021 budget.
So moved by Ms. Yang. Any discussion on that motion? Seeing none, roll call.
Tolbert,
Yes.
Naker,
Aye.
Tao,
Aye.
Prince,
Aye.
Jalali,
Aye.
Yang,
Aye.
Council President Brenmon.
Aye.
7 in favor, no one opposed. The resolution is adopted. Item number 30, resolution 20-1653, approving the St. Paul River Center Convention and Visitors Authority 2021 budget.
So moved by Ms. Prince. Is there any discussion on that motion? Seeing none, roll call.
Tolbert,
Yes.
Naker,
Aye.
Tao,
Aye.
Prince,
Aye.
Jalali,
Aye.
Yang,
Aye.
Council President Brenmon.
Aye.
7 in favor, no one opposed. The resolution is adopted.
All right, now just for folks who are going through this budget process for the first time and people who are tuning in, I just want to give a little heads up about what's in front of us right now. The City Council is about to recess, and then we will magically reconvene as the Library Board, even though for viewers watching it will seem like nothing changed. But Ms. Prince will chair the Library Board as we consider the resolution adopting the 2020 budget. And then once that business is attended to, we will adjourn the library and come back together to consider the remaining items on the city budget. We just have to pass we passed the HRA budget during the HRA meeting. We'll pass the library budget, and then we'll be able to move forward. Before item number 33, we will get a report from the OFS, our finance team, our budget team, and Ms. Houston. And then we will vote on the city tax levy and the adopting the 2021 city budget. So if folks have comments on the budget, they would be appropriate probably in advance of the item number 33, approving the city tax levy, just for planning purposes. And then I will also just share that I think it would make sense that given we have one meeting next week, if folks, we'll carve out a little time for sort of end of the year thoughts and reflections if we want to look more holistically beyond just the parameters of the budget. So with that, little heads up information, the St. Paul City Council will be in recess.
At the library board meeting is adjourned.
The St. Paul City Council is called back to order. Roll call.
Tolbert,
Yes.
Naker,
Here.
Tao,
Here.
Prince,
Here.
Jalali,
Here.
Yang,
Here.
Council President Brenmoen.
Here.
7 present, no one absent. Item 31, Resolution 20-1672, approving and adopting the St. Paul Public Library Agency budget.
This item is moved by the Library Board Chair Prince. Any further discussion on this item that we just talked about in the other meeting? Mr. Tolbert.
Oh, that was a holdover from last time I wanted to talk.
Just a high five. Okay.
The same speech that I gave at the library board. Ditto.
Yeah, those are odd when they come back to back like that. Any other comments? All right, seeing none, it's been moved by Ms. Prince. Roll call.
Tolbert,
Yes.
Naker,
Aye.
Tao,
Aye.
Prince,
Aye.
Jalali,
Aye.
Yang,
Aye.
Council President Brenmoen.
Aye.
7 in favor, no one opposed. The resolution is adopted. Oh, as amended. You're going with the same amendment?
Yeah.
As with the library board?
Yes, please.
Item 32, Resolution 20-1683, approving the final 2021 Housing and Redevelopment Authority budget and certifying the final HRA property tax levy payable in 2021.
And again, this item was discussed at our 2 o'clock HRA meeting, and now is before the City Council to approve and as part of its final budget process. Is there any further thoughts about the HRA budget and property tax levy? Seeing none, HRA Chair Tolbert moves approval. Roll call.
Tolbert,
Yes.
Naker,
Aye.
Tao,
Aye.
Prince,
Aye.
Jalali,
Aye.
Yang,
Aye.
Council President Brenmoen.
Aye.
7 in favor, no one opposed. The resolution is adopted. Item 33, Resolution 20-1648, approving the 2021 city tax levy.
All right, and I believe we will begin this portion. As I mentioned, we'll get a report from the administration as well as from Ms. Houston about item 33 and 34 together, and then we'll take the vote separately. So Ms. Earle, the floor is yours.
Great. Thank you, Council President Brenmoen, Council Members Susan Earle, Office of Financial Services. I'm really just going to kick off the discussion, and then we'll be passing it off to both Madi Guerra and Madeline Mitchell in our office to walk through some details of some items and features of this year's budget adoption that we just wanted to make sure folks are aware of. Before I do that, I do just want to give a quick thank you to Madeline, Madi, Mark Strom, Laura Logston, Brian George, and Mandalina Lee on our budget team who've done incredible work this year on the 2021 budget. So you all hear from me a lot, but really they're the ones doing the work. And you know, I'm here presenting a lot of the work and the hard work that they've done over the course of the year. So just wanted to make sure to acknowledge them. As you mentioned, Ms. Houston will speak to the council policy changes. Ms. Guerra is going to talk about contingency funding. It's a unique feature and a new feature of our budget adoption this year. Given the continued uncertainty of COVID, economic performance and our revenues. And I know this was alluded to earlier in the meeting, but there is a contingency built in for some of the funding items that are included in the budget. And so Ms. Guerra will run through that policy and how that's working in the budget. And then Ms. Mitchell will give the summary of the levy. And so she'll talk through the various components of the city levy that you all be voting on to approve for 2021. So we're all on the line for questions should they come up. But with that, I will pass it over to Ms. Guerra.
Good evening, Council President Brenmoen, council members. My name is Mari Guerra, and I am a senior budget analyst with the Office of Financial Services. Today, I'll briefly discuss the contingency policy that is attached to the budget adoption resolution. In broad strokes, the contingency policy provides a mechanism by which, if in 2021, our overall general fund revenues are forecast to be at least 1% higher than budget, then we can authorize the use of contingency funding for the agreed upon purposes. For 2021, the identified use of contingency is $86,034 to fund Parks and Recreation Rec Center hours and $70,000 to fund library staffing. In terms of criteria when making the determination to use a contingency, we will make, our office will look at whether overall general fund revenues projections are coming at or above 1% of budget. In terms of timing, we will have 2 checkpoints in 2021 to determine the use of contingency. We will make an initial determination in June, and then we will have the opportunity to revisit in September. Reviewing revenues in the second half of the year allows us for more data points and a higher degree of confidence in year-end projections. In terms of communication, council staff, namely Holly Houston, will be invited to attend our June revenue monitoring meeting when the determination to use contingency will be made. And then as a follow-up to the June determination, we will have a September check-in where we will check once again if our overall general fund projected revenues are meeting the 1% above budget threshold. If that is the case, then that's great. And the use of contingency funding is approved. If revenues are projected to be going the opposite way, then at the September meeting, then we would then freeze the use of contingency and its spending. So this has been a very brief overview of the contingency policy. At this time, I will pause to see if you have any questions. Otherwise, I will pass the mic over to my colleague, Madeline Mitchell, to discuss our city levy.
All right, and it does not appear that there are questions.
Thank you.
Great. Good afternoon, Council President Brenmoen, council members. My name is Madeline Mitchell. I am a senior budget analyst in the Office of Financial Services. And as Susan mentioned, I'm going to walk through the 2021 property tax levy. As you know, there's no increase in the property tax levy in the 2021 budget, meaning the city will levy the same amount of property taxes in 2021 as it did in 2020. The total 2021 levy for the city of St. Paul is just over $165 million. And this includes $126 million for the city general fund operations, $18.5 million for city debt service, $18.4 million for the St. Paul Public Libraries, and $2.1 million levied on behalf of the St. Paul Port Authority. It's always important to note here that while the city is not increasing the total amount of property taxes collected for 2021, this does not mean that all property owners will see no change in their city property taxes. Changes in market value and other factors can change the amount a property owner pays, even if the total amount collected does not. And we can see this illustrated when we look at a median value home, which for 2021 is valued at $215,000. And this median value home is expected to see a decrease of $15 in their city property taxes. It's also important to note here that the city accounts for only a portion of a total property tax bill. For the median value home in 2021, the city portion is about $891 or of the total estimated $3,077 bill, and that's about 29%. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any other questions or pass it back to Susan if she has anything else to add.
Are there questions for Ms. Mitchell? All right. It looks like there are no questions on this item.
Thank you.
All right, Council President Brenmoen and council members, I'm just going to pull up a quick presentation. Okay, good afternoon, Council President Brenmoen and council members. I'm Holly Houston, the City Council's Chief Budget Officer. And I'd just like to say thank you to the Office of Financial Services and the budget team for all their work throughout the budget process. They've been instrumental in having the documentation and presentations required to get us here today, and really for the City Council to be able to evaluate the budget. So thank you, Office team. And on the agenda today, you've already taken action on a series of budget actions in preparation to vote on the adoption of the 2021 budget. Behind those resolutions are countless hours of staff time, community input, and council evaluation. I'd like to thank Council President Brenmoen for her leadership throughout the budget process. And really thank you to all the council members for your time and engagement and taking the budget seriously and prioritizing it. It's been a pleasure to work with all of you. I'd also like to thank department directors and their leadership staff that provided the council with informative budget presentations. So I'm here today to just briefly describe the City Council budget process, really through September until today, through December. We've been hard at work. Once the mayor proposed the budget at the end of August, the City Council began to thoroughly review the $627 million City of St. Paul budget. At the end of September, the City Council set the levy limit at the proposed rate of 0%. Next, the City Council carefully evaluated the department budgets with a focus on the impact to residents and asked for community input. This year was important to balance fiscal responsibility while preserving valuable services for St. Paul residents. During the City Council budget phase, there's been many different opportunities for public engagement. They're listed here. This year, the City Council collected feedback from over 159 people who took time to fill out an online survey. The survey allowed the City Council to collect valuable information in a new way. The survey asked people what they liked about the budget, what they would change, and how they would prioritize spending. There was support for investments in community first public safety, parks and library services, affordable housing, and helping the unsheltered. There is also support for maintaining low property tax increases while preserving city services. The feedback that we heard in that budget survey aligns with the City Council budget priorities set out in the beginning of the year. The City Council wanted to maintain low property tax increases, community first public safety investments, affordable housing, tenant protections, support family and businesses impacted by the pandemic and the civil unrest, city infrastructure and homelessness, and the unsheltered. As the City Council carefully evaluated the proposed budget, it became clear that there were some budget reductions that the City Council wanted to prioritize and restore in the final 2021 budget. The final resolution to adopt the 2021 budget includes additional funding for library collections, library hours, parks and recreation programming, tenant protections, and mill and overlay. The council was able to add these additional budget investments through identifying one-time savings and shifting some budget resources between funds. And finally, if we look back to the City Council's priorities identified early in the year, the 2021 adopted budget in front of you encompasses investments in all of those priorities listed here. And with that, I will stand for questions.
Are there questions for Ms. Houston? Looks like there's not a question. Oh, Mr. Tao.
Thank you, President Brenmoen. And Holly, thank you for your update and your hard work this year. can you reflect with us what was probably the most difficult in this budget process?
Council President Brenmoen and Councilmember Tao. I think this was a unique year because the city was facing decreased revenues, budget reductions, and also a minimum tax increase. And so a combination of all those things made it difficult to protect services while also meeting our budget goals. And this year we were able to do that. And I think it's something to be really proud of through reducing vacancies and attrition and other measures. We are able to meet a 0% levy. And so I think it was a difficult year.
Thank you.
Thank you. Are there other questions for Ms. Houston? And I sometimes point out that, and this is probably the reason why Vice President Naker bought me a glitter gun at one point, but that by the time we get to this point in the process, we've really discussed so many pieces and parts of this budget along the way, whether it's St. Paul Regional Water Services budget or the HRA budget or different fees that we've set. And so when we come to this final day, sometimes it feels like we've kind of talked it all out, but I think that's the way it should be. And we've really made a commitment to engaging people as early as possible in the process so that our shared values across the community are reflected in the budget. Also recognizing that we have different priorities and values across the city, and we do our best to try to balance those when we're taking these things into account over the course of a year. I do. Before we go ahead with the vote and maybe just to kind of kick off some comments, I would like to, first and foremost, acknowledge that Mayor Carter and the department leadership and staff have really presented us with an incredible budget this year. The council's top priority was to keep the levy as low as possible to help our families and businesses who are struggling in COVID. And I don't think I could have ever imagined that we would get a 0% levy increase budget to take a look at that included no layoffs with our city staff and also did not raid our emergency fund. It didn't give us a lot of room, as it often is. Our role in the process is really to try to find different funding sources, identify different priorities, and this budget did not open up a lot of space for the council's work. But nevertheless, as Holly just presented, we did find budget space. We found funds creatively to restore rec hours, to restore programming, to restore library hours. And I think very creatively, we held true to our commitment to continuing our mill and overlay street reconstruction program, and also made a pretty firm stance that we intend to expand that program and catch up on our maintenance delays. And so it has been an incredibly challenging, but I think that it's something where as a team, we've really worked hard to pull through and come out on the other end with a budget that we can be proud of, and that sets us up in a pretty good spot for what I think could be another challenging budget year walking into 2022. So thank you to the administration for working with us on this budget that reflects our priorities, and I will let know other council members have priorities that they want to particularly highlight. I do want to thank our Chief Budget Officer, Holly Houston, who has been a pleasure to work with. Yep, look at you getting a round of applause from council members, and just continuing to refine this budget process year after year, and I think making it more and more accessible, not only to council members, but to the public who are interested. And looking at the numbers of folks and hearing who's been watching our budget hearings, I think that I'm just going to say we've probably set a record, which isn't saying much, but we have had a lot of people watching and participating, which I think is fantastic. And Holly, thank you for, grinding through the numbers, but also making it something that everybody can wrap their heads around. I tried to do this a couple weeks ago and got shut down, but our budget director in the Office of Financial Services, Susan Earle, is here for her final meeting. And she too has been a champion on the city budget process and helping us understand the mayor's perspective on the budget and working with us as we wrestle to get our priorities in there as well. She has been, it's been wonderful working with her over these years, and we wish her the very, very best. And thank you so much to you and your team on the budget. And of course, Mr. McCarthy, Director McCarthy, who is a partner onto the council in navigating the budget process. So thank you all very much for your work. Also, to my colleagues, this is a team sport. I always say that we work together and we do our best when we are working in partnership and together, and identifying our priorities early and recognizing the challenges and coming to the end of this budget process feeling like kind of a family. We've been through it, but we're on the other side of it here today. And I appreciate everyone's, I think Holly used the word taking it seriously. Folks really dug in, paid attention, identified places where they thought we could cut or switch things, and it takes all of those sharp minds thinking and navigating to make things happen. So true gratitude and appreciation for all of your participation in this as well. I know this is not the Academy Awards, but I do just want to make those announcements because I, as I've said a few times during our budget meetings, I know the work it takes to week after week come up with these presentations with graphs, with graphics, with coming back with answers for our questions. And I want to tell staff members we appreciate that. We look at it and we take our role in this budget process very seriously, and we appreciate the partnership as well. So that is my piece, and I will look to my colleagues for other sharings, and then again remind people that we will open up some time at our council meeting next week to kind of look at the year in review as well. Ms. Naker.
Thank you, Council President. Thank you so much for your leadership throughout this process. I know it feels like everything in 2020 has taken 10 times as long as it normally does, but this budget process has felt like it flew by, and it was so well facilitated. I really appreciate all that you've done for that. And, I was just thinking about how we said what feels like 10 years ago at the beginning of our budget process in August, that we could use the pandemic not just as a challenge, but also as an opportunity to think about things differently. And as I look back on the conversations we've had over the last few months, I really think that we did that. I think we did that in our budget committee meetings, where we asked really foundational questions and unpacked a lot of the things that we normally just assume about our budget and questioned them. And some of those things we resolved in the budget, some of those things we have yet to resolve in policy sessions next year. And I also think that the pandemic kind of gave us a chance to look ourselves in the mirror and realize what those basic core services are that we and we alone as a city can provide, and that our community depends on, and to really double down and focus on those programs and those services. And we received hundreds of emails and calls, as Ms. Houston mentioned, on the budget this year. And I want to thank our constituents so much for contacting us, despite how much else you have going on right now. You took time to weigh in. And the vast majority of those comments focused on those basic public services, on public safety, on our libraries, and our parks and rec programming. And from the very beginning of this budget, my priority has been to save those services, specifically that prioritize families, because our families, our young kids right now in this pandemic are just suffering so much. And anything that we can do as a city to continue to provide opportunities for them, to me, should be our priority. And I think our budget, the changes that we've made to the budget, really reflect that. We restored, as has been said, rec center hours, lap, swim, and water aerobics, athletic programming for kids of all ages, library hours, and library materials. And those were services that would have been cut in the original proposal. So I want to recognize the fact that we as a council came together and we restored those things. And I also am glad that and it's not at all sexy, but street maintenance in the long term, this is easily could have been a year when we said, you know what, we're just going to kick the can down the road one more year on street maintenance. And we know, driving around our streets, that we cannot afford to do that. And we didn't. So we are fully funding street maintenance this year, as originally we weren't going to. So kudos to my colleagues for the work that we've done. I think these changes make our budget so much stronger and so much better for the families of St. Paul.
Thanks, Ms. Naker. And thank you also for being such a strong thought partner in this budget process. It's been a pleasure to work with you. I see Ms. Prince and then Ms. Jalali have hands up.
I want to say ditto to what both Council President Brenmoen and Council Vice President Naker have said. And I want to give you and Councilmember Tolbert, HRA Chair Tolbert, a lot of thanks and credit for the weekly meetings that you held to go over the budget and to reach out to each of us who were not in that circle to ensure that each of us were able to address priorities of our wards. And at the same time, we were able to accept that each of us had to let something go. And I don't think we've done it that way before, where we've had a leadership team who kind of put these proposals together. I thought it was I felt like it was really fair and balanced, and I'm thankful for that. And especially, as you've said, in a year with a zero property tax levy, where everything is going badly. I mean, our revenues are down and our prospects don't look bright. So I will have no difficulty voting for this budget, and I thank the three of you for that. I also want to thank Holly. I don't know what I'm going to do without seeing Holly every Monday morning, but I suspect that'll start up again around March, so I won't get used to it. I also want to say I really appreciate the creative use of the contingency budget. When I was a council aide, this was something we used in the past. I had forgotten that it was an option. I do want to say, I'm not going to always be able to be Pollyanna, but given that this budget contains at least 2 vacant 6-figure administration positions, I would have preferred to put those in contingency and to have fully funded our parks and library hours. But that notwithstanding, I strongly support the restoration of lap swim, water aerobics, and parks program. And I am grateful that we were able to find grant support to restore many, if not all, of the library hours that were not part of the proposed budget, and that we were also able to bring our library's material budget up to where it should be for this year. So again, thanks to all of my colleagues, and I'm really proud that we've arrived at a good, responsible budget that really reflects all of us.
Thank you, Ms. Princeton. Thanks for your kind words. Appreciate it. Ms. Jalali.
Thank you. I've been quiet and I'm holding in a lot of emotions. I think that many have spoken to this point about the complexity that we're facing, the difficult choices we've had to make, and the realities ahead that are only going to get harder. So I want to start by saying I respect the staff work that has gone into this budget. I respect our effort to keep the parameters where they were, and I respect that we are all making difficult choices. I'm speaking because I am acknowledging that this budget comes in response to a year of pain, uprisings, civil unrest, and endless emergencies, many of which hit the ward that I represent in the heart of the Midway in Ward 4 during those fateful days in June when our community erupted in the wake of the killing of George Floyd. And I believe we have a responsibility to both meet our community needs as a local government, but also fight for the reality that our city deserves. People are right to acknowledge that the council proposal for this budget restores many key priorities that our city depends on: more funding for parks and rec centers, libraries, roads, and other city services that families need and use. And it also guarantees continued or additional funding for equity and justice priorities I have personally fought very hard for, including resources for tenant protections enforcement for our forthcoming fair housing ordinance, and our early stage community first public safety initiatives passed last year that are the groundwork for real community safety. And at the same time, after a year in which Minnesota made national news and continues to for the police murder of George Floyd, and we spent weeks in a state of constant uprisings and civil unrest as a rightful reaction to that injustice, this budget does very little to change the police funding status quo. And after hearing our truth in taxation comments and testimony and spending personally hundreds of hours in conversations with community and activists in the fight for justice, I am personally struggling to understand, and I am very frustrated that our council proposal would show so little movement on the most prominent national conversation about police funding we have had in recent memory. And I especially struggle to understand that given our significant investment in SPPD and what we have to show for it as a community. We have a department with a budget of over 120 million a year, and last year, even with reductions, the highest sworn strength for a number of police officers in city history. And yet advocates for police funding who continually bring up crime statistics and fear-mongering about cuts to this reality themselves make the case that with more resources than ever, SPPD is not effective at preventing crime. Upon digging into their budget, there's a startling lack of transparency, and it helps point to why a department has succeeded so long in getting a huge portion of our city resources for comparatively little effect for what it's intended. And I personally don't feel that our budget discussions this cycle began to scratch the surface of areas for improvement to fund our city and our futures by divesting from SPPD, which our community repeatedly called upon us to do in the budget survey and in the truth in taxation and hundreds of emails that we got. Areas for improvement where we need to look at future divestments, to me, include the K-9 unit. In just my time on the council alone, our city has paid out a combined $2.6 million in settlements for K-9 attacks that left people badly injured. We lived through this last week when another community member was shot at and attacked by a K-9 while naked and unarmed. And despite being a smaller city than Minneapolis, our city and county sheriff K-9 units combined give us nearly twice as many of this type of resource as our neighboring city has. And I think that's an example of how multiple levels of government can overfund policing despite what's appropriate for the population. And many in our community have rightfully called for us to consider disbanding the K-9 unit and usage of K-9s altogether. And this would return another couple $1 million to our city for better use in public safety. Our Community First Public Safety Initiatives budget is just $1.4 million in comparison, and that's about as much as we're spending on police dogs, if not more. Another conversation that came up are some units within SPPD, like the Community Engagement Unit. This is over $8 million in the name of community policing, but at the end of the day, these are still more officers and a form of over-policing instead of money directly back into our communities. We brought this concern up in budget sessions as something we should explore reducing, and community leaders who do neighborhood violence prevention on a shoestring budget right now could use this funding to do life-changing work without funding the police. We should be looking at that. And lastly, at the end of the day, so many residents have reached out to my office and to many of us to just say, let's have less officers, period. And I'm just going to put it that simply. These areas I just talked about before this are just $10 million or more in taxpayer savings, but the vast majority of police funding goes to our overall officer headcount and the built-in cost of maintaining it to great additional cost in addition to what it already costs. I believe we create safety not by funding more officers, but by taking care of people. And until we divest from this costly department and into the core areas of life that ensure community stability, the size of this department will always threaten to grow and justify itself continually in a cycle where costs are never questioned, no matter the fallout. I don't think the status quo is good enough for our community. I think the forthcoming mayoral commission on alternatives to 911 calls is the type of future initiative that could eventually save lives if we will act on its recommendations in the budget. And I also think about our Community First Public Safety Initiatives, which received a level of scrutiny by this council that, again, are just about $1.4 million. And that level of scrutiny was so different than the sessions we had with our police department that has an over $120 million budget. And we have a power as a city to stop this cycle and to shift funding from police to real community safety. And I'm saying all this because I am one of very few council members, and I recognize that as we look at this consensus proposal, I'm ready to support significant cuts in divestment and reinvestment to SPPD today. And I'm discouraged that given the year we've had, our council budget does not reflect an historic community demand to this year's events with a significant reduction and reordering priorities to create safety. So if you have called us, if you have sent one of the hundreds of emails, calls, or gave testimony with an overwhelming message to divest from police and fund community safety, I want you to know your advocacy has helped preserve our community first public safety programs. It has helped fight off increases to police who we've seen lots and lots of demand for, even as people are homeless in our community. And you have held off further backsliding. But I also believe we can and must do much better as a city to change this over time. So to people fighting for this vision, I'm speaking today to say that you deserve more than lip service because lives are on the line, and I will keep fighting with you. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Jalali. Are there other comments? Ms. Yang. Oops, I think your mute's still on.
Oh, yes, it is. Thank you. I have a question. Are you going to be taking like comments from the council as well on the next agenda item? I would like to comment, but I think I might save it for the next one since we're going to be talking directly about adopting the budget.
We're taking the public hearing, I think, with the staff report just as a combined report. So if you have comments on 33 or 34, now would be a great time to make those comments, and then we'll vote on the two separately. But you can make a distinction on which item it is that you're primarily focused on.
Thank you. That sounds good. I will speak now then. Let me just pull up the agenda as a quick refresher for me. I feel, that I want to recognize, like, I feel everything that everyone says today is something I can resonate with in terms of how much effort has been put into the budget and how much, our council members have been working to do whatever we can to prioritize the things that we do believe in for the future of St. Paul and for our residents. And I definitely see our parks and library and our youth being a part of that. And so I want to say thank you to you all because I feel like that's something to be uplifted. I also want to say that, in terms of the budget, something I'm feeling in my heart is I'm celebrating a lot of what was accomplished this year as I think about us passing the SAFE ordinance, making sure that folks who are renters have tenant rights, and making sure that we are allocating money for that. That is a huge win. It's not something that was done with the council here alone, but with the many people who advocated and have done so for years and years, not just this year. And that's something I'm celebrating. I'm also celebrating the wins that we will be achieving and making sure that we don't have another police academy for this upcoming year. I think that it was really bold to do that. And while I know that there were council members who aspired to see that, I think it was great to see, us really stay in solidarity with each other and stick to our commitment to people and knowing that, reallocating our resources from our police department to other priorities was something that was important. And I felt like we stuck to that. And I just want to name that, after the truth and taxation hearing, it was a very emotional experience for me. One of the reasons why is because I, prior to being on the council, I was a grassroots organizer working directly on criminal justice reform. And I remember organizing and talking about defunding the police and abolishing the police and why that was important to me and the many ways growing up in which I felt so small in our systems, and how I felt like organizing and speaking up was a way for me to actually channel my voice and leadership. And it's what brought me to where I am today. And the reason why it was such an emotional experience is because I saw that in so many of the people who came and testified in front of us and wrote letters, they wrote emails, they came and talked about their experience at the police in such a genuine and sincere way that I felt it deep in my heart. And it brought me back to those memories where I did feel small, and also times when I felt very powerful, as working in a mass of people. And it's folks like that who came in and stood in front of us virtually and spoke to us from the heart. And I'm so moved by that, and I'm inspired by them. And I also want to name that while there are things to celebrate for this year in the budget we have in front of us, I think that we are so undeserving of the people who came to testify, the people, who we name are marginalized in our communities. And that's Black and Brown people, Indigenous people, folks from the working class, because people have made a clear demand, and I'm not just talking about in St. Paul, but all across the nation, for cities to reallocate money from our police department, not just in a baby increment, but in a massive increment. And we had an opportunity to do that. But I feel like we did not do it. And I think that, what we did, what I'm seeing in the budget right now is, leadership within our collective as a council, acting from a place of comfort. And we cannot settle for that. We need to do so much more, and we need to be bold, and we need to be courageous. I often hear, some of you talk about being practical. Being practical, I feel, is what has actually led us to where we are today and many of the social injustices that we face, especially for folks who are from marginalized communities. And that's not working for us. And so in saying that, we are so undeserving of the people who came and expressed to us their deepest desires and their willingness to be even more ambitious than all of us. I am inspired by them, and I'm moved by them. And it's also, I think we need to take a look at that and see that we need to do more. I'm so grateful to you, Councilmember Jalali, for your deep solidarity in this from the very beginning. When I ran for city council, I knew that this was going to be a priority. And I've just been honored to be able to work with you hand in hand on this, and seeing you, show up so boldly. And I want to be able to say the same thing, for all of my counterparts on the council too, and I can't right now, and so I want to be completely honest about that, because I think that we definitely let a lot of people down, and we're going to be seeing that a lot. After the vote today, we're already seeing that in the communication from organizations, from people who are impacted by the injustices in our systems. And for those of us who haven't experienced that, well, you're very lucky, because there are people who have a very different story that they carry, and I think that that's something we need to bring with us in our work, and that's something I'm committed to as well. And so those are my comments. I think that the budget that we have in front of us is definitely one that I feel we need to do so much more on, and we'll be committing to that every single year that I have here on the council to work with you all.
You're on mute, Council President.
Thank you very much. I do see, Ms. Nicker, you have your hand back up. I know I have Mr. Tao also waiting to make comments.
I think I'm behind Mr. Tao.
Okay, Mr. Tao.
Thank you, Council President. Thank you for this insightful and important conversation. What I want to say is that, to the friends and neighbors and the people across St. Paul, from what I can see, this is a realistic and solid budget, given that this year has been more challenging for our city than any in recent memory. We are still very much in a midst of a global pandemic that has highlighted and laid bare inequalities that exist in our community, including but not limited to access to food, internet, and healthcare, housing. St. Paul residents and our neighbors across the river, Minneapolis, became the epicenter of a vast and inspiring call for racial justice that spread across the globe after the murder of George Floyd in May. But despite what has happened in 2020, our community has proven that we are resilient, and that our difference are what has made us collectively stronger. In passing a zero levy increase was a critical action that we took this year to provide much needed relief to residents and local businesses. However, that meant that across the city and city departments and city staff were tasked in making tough decisions. And I'm proud that and in awe of the many creative ways the city staff have maintained much needed service within our parks and library, that our public works department is able to undertake much needed street repairs and redesign projects, especially within our planning economic development department, with staff mobilized immediately to provide direct cash relief to families and small businesses that were hit hardest by COVID-19 pandemic and the civil unrest. My priorities remain to be similar in other years, and ensuring St. Paul is the best place to live and to do business. And the main area of focus continue to be public safety, affordable housing, economic justice, and expanded service for our youth. I'm proud of this year's budget for continuing to fund these priorities, many of which are shared by my colleague as well, we heard tonight. This includes restoring our library hours and the collections, restoring parks and recreation center hours, funding, rolling out of the city's new tenant protections, fully funding our mill and overlay programs and projects. This budget challenged us to fund those priorities, but I'm grateful to the dedicated team of our city staff, the department leaders who work with us to make this possible. And I hope that we can carry the energy and the conversation that we've had tonight and the innovation and the care for one another moving forward into 2021 and beyond. This won't be the last budget that we'll be working on, but this set a strong foundation, what economic justice looks like, what racial justice looks like, what community first public safety looks like. These are very bold conversations that we are having. And I look forward to working with everybody across the city and my colleague on City Council to make sure that we get to this place. So I look forward to supporting this budget.
Thank you so much, Mr. Tao. Ms. Nicker.
Thank you, Council President. I just wanted to thank Councilmember Yang and Councilmember Jalali for your words about public safety and about the need for systemic reform. And I just want to be clear that in voting for this budget and in supporting this budget, I am absolutely not supporting the status quo with regard to public safety. I think all of us have been really clear that we know that the murder of George Floyd requires a complete rethinking of how we ensure safety in our community. What I am supporting, though, is the plan that the mayor has laid out and that all of us on this council agreed to just a few weeks ago when we supported the plan for a community first public safety task force and for a time to thoughtfully consider the changes that we need to make rather than indiscriminately hacking away at the police budget. Because we know that it does nobody any favors. It does not do our community a service when we make promises without the due diligence it takes to actually make sure that we have a plan. But that said, this is where we're adopting our budget tonight. If there's an alternative budget proposal that creates different funding streams, I'm happy to consider any proposals.
Thank you, Ms. Naker. I was sharing some of your thoughts and reminded of council members of the past who showed up on the day of the final budget vote to complain about where we landed, but offered no alternative plans. This takes a lot of work. You got to push your sleeves up along the way so that when we get here today, you can have a budget that you feel like you're a part of. Takes a lot of work. Ms. Prince.
Thank you. And I also want to acknowledge Council members Yang and Jalali for their commitment to this issue and the strong advocacy that they provide. I do want to say, because I think that it has not been covered, and I think it's not been covered because it's confusing, but the mayor's proposed budget, we saw that he cut, somewhere under $1 million from the police budget, which seemed inadequate. You both spoke to the fact that more should have come away from that. But I do want to point out that the police budget in St. Paul historically has budgeted for attrition. And this year, that attrition is $3.7 million. So in other words, police have to either resign or retire in 2021 until there's $3.7 million in savings before another police officer can be hired, which means that we are effectively, and I worry about this, I am actually worried about this, we are effectively going to be seeing a cut of 30 to 40 officers in 2021. So I want you to be aware that while it may seem that we haven't done anything dramatic to the police budget. That is one of the little understood factors that is truly a significant cut to the St. Paul police budget. In an average year, they budget for $2 million in attrition. This year, they have budgeted for $3.7 million. We didn't have a police academy in 2020. That's another cut. We were going to be able to hire, if we had had a police academy in 2020, we would have been able to hire the Law Enforcement Career Path Academy students, all students of color, who were trained through our community engagement work as AmeriCorps volunteers while they got their law enforcement associate degrees. So I want to assure you that for anyone looking at this budget, on either side of the issue about public safety, we are indeed making a significant cut to our police department. And I hope you will look into that so that you can fully understand it. We've had it reported to us on numerous occasions, and it just fails to sort of, it's difficult to understand it. I haven't understood it, and I finally got my head around it. And so I do want to assure you that we have made a substantial cut to the police department, and one that I think personally, and for the people that I represent, I'm concerned about. But I think that you have gotten more in this budget than you maybe realize. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Ms. Prince. And thanks for tackling that attrition. It's a very challenging topic to go through, so thank you for tackling that. I'm looking to my colleagues here to see if, Mr. Tolbert, you ready to wrap this up? Mr. Tolbert.
Thank you very much, and I'll try not to repeat what many of my colleagues have already said so eloquently, but first, I do want to take this opportunity to thank Council President Brenmoen. As Council President, there is a huge additional weight of work in leading the budget process, and I want to thank you for taking that on and for leading us through there. Obviously, there's disagreements on multiple issues amongst this council, and you have to lead us to get some sort of consensus. And I think a lot of times when we pass things, even though it's we live in a world of absolutism and tweets back and forth, when you actually have to govern and make hard choices, we have to have some sort of compromise, and sometimes people are going to be unhappy with certain things, a little bit unhappy or very unhappy with certain things, but it's a big budget with a lot of different things in it. I also want to thank the Mayor's Office and Administration. I think they had a tough job of taking the first draft at this budget, and they were open to working with us on the council priorities, and that's a big deal. This was probably the toughest budget that I've had to work on in my now almost 9 years on the council, because it's the first one with a 0% levy increase, which that means we are starting behind, because we basically, by having a 0% levy increase with the cost of running a city, we're already behind by millions of dollars, and so it's really hard. Every single department had to be looked at, and I want to say some of the things that are cuts, whether it's for example, police, last year's budget was about $105 million, now it's $104 million and $200,000. Whether it's that 0.08 cut or if it's a deeper cut, they weren't cuts that we necessarily celebrated, but cuts that we tried to do to make this budget balance. And we did the 0% levy increase because, as my colleague said, that people and businesses are hurting, and asking more money from our residents would have been very hard to do in this year. So we started with that 0% levy increase. And I want to thank almost every department was willing to look under their couch cushions to try and be part of this budget solution, knowing that it was a lot of tough decisions that every department was having to make in terms of priorities. I still think back to Fire Chief Inks presentation, and I thought he put it so well, and it stuck with me throughout this entire budget process. He said, "This isn't my proposal, this is our plan." And I think that's an important distinction, because it indicated he wasn't proposing cuts to his own department, but he was going to work within the budget limitations that the city had, to ensure that the fire department, which also has our paramedics and EMTs and firefighters, that the fire department would take the budget as best they could. Obviously, every department wants more resources, but take that and focus and prioritize so that the public safety of St. Paul residents was first and foremost. He was going to use the resources within his department and the resources that we funded to do that. And I think that's a good way for us to look at this entire budget, because there are a lot of things that didn't get in this budget that I think in a perfect world we'd be able to fund or get money to. And that most every department was willing to be part of that solution. And I think one of the issues, obviously, that has been talked about the most throughout this budget process, and tonight, of course, is community first public safety. And I think we have done a good job of embracing our community first public safety with the both and approach. We have funded our police department so that we have patrol, which I know this council prioritizes patrol officers and investigators that are fully trained, including investments in police reform, and investing in with the potential to have the police academy if those retirements do happen later down the line. We've also funded alternatives to policing. And I think that's an important thing to remember too. There's direct alternatives, new ones that we want to try out and see if they work, but also the important alternatives to policing, which is much of what the city has. That's our rec centers, our libraries, our community ambassadors, our housing options, our investment in jobs, our investment in transportation, our investment in all the things that in a greater sense bring together community first public safety. And I think that's an important component to remember, that we are investing in public safety via the police department, via alternatives to policing, and via the fire department, our parks and recs, and libraries. And I think that's an important thing as we try, and we are all well aware, we have a long way to go with policing, not just in St. Paul, but in our country in general. And we want to ensure that all law-abiding St. Paul residents feel safe from anybody that would want to commit a crime, but also safe from the authorities. And we know that based on the history that we still have a long way to go in perfecting that here in the city of St. Paul, but also across the country. I also want to take the opportunity to thank the additional things that we've had. We got a lot of people who wrote in about investing in our libraries, investing in parks. And I also think it is important to note that we restore the mill and overlay cuts, because that is something that I know many of us who have been on the council a little bit longer have complained about previous councils and previous administrations making mill and overlays the easy cuts throughout the years. And that's why our roads have reached the level of disrepair that they have reached in some neighborhood, or on some streets and throughout every neighborhood, not just some neighborhoods. And I think that's an important thing to make sure that we continue that long-term investment in our infrastructure. With that, I want to say thank you to everybody who was a part of this. Like I said, not everything is in this budget that I want, and I think that's across the board for all 7 of us, and including the mayor. I will also add the one thing, and I know you guys have heard me talk about this on the previous, both on the library budget and the HRA budget, but I think this is our best plan for 2021 based on where we are today. I think there are going to be a lot of changes in the coming weeks, in the coming months, in the coming year and years regarding the state of the world and what we can and can't do, and how we can provide the best services to our residents, whether that means having libraries that are open, having curbside pickup with books, whether that means being able to have a pool open at the rec center, what kind of
PPP that we need to invest in for our workers, and in all across the board. So I continue to say we should think of this as our current game plan, but be willing and open to amend it. I know I am, as time goes on and as the state of the world and the situation changes in our world. And I would recommend that that the administration comes back to us with a report, probably sometime mid next year, so that we can relook at this budget and see if there's things that we need to change going forward. I think that would be a wise way to govern, and I think most would agree with that. So with that being said, thank you all for all your work. Thank you all the city department staff, particularly the Office of Financial Services led by John McCarthy, Holly Houston, who is our finance go-to person. I'm not going to go through the list of naming everybody because there are so many people throughout every single department, from department directors down to people who manage a rec center and beyond, who had to really get their pencil sharpened and work to get this budget complete. So thank you, everybody who was a part of that. We are grateful. And with that, I am obviously supporting this budget. So thank you all.
Thank you, Mr. Tolbert. All right, so we've heard from folks around the horn, and so I will take a motion from Ms. Naker to approve the item number 33, which is the city tax levy. Roll call.
Tolbert.
Yes.
Naker.
Aye.
Tao.
Aye.
Prince.
Aye.
Jalali.
Aye.
Yang.
Aye.
Council President Brenmoen.
Aye.
7 in favor, no one opposed. The resolution is adopted. Item number 34, Resolution 20-1649, adopting the 2021 budget.
All right, and we have had a staff report and conversation about this item as well. As such, Vice President Naker would move approval. Any discussion on that motion? All right, seeing none, roll call.
Tolbert.
Yeah.
Naker.
Aye.
Tao.
Aye.
Prince.
Aye.
Jalali.
No.
Yang.
No.
Council President Brenmoen.
Aye.
5 in favor, 2 opposed, being Council members Jalali and Yang. The resolution is adopted. Item number 35, final adoption of ordinance 20-29, amending chapter 409 of the legislative code pertaining to the distance restriction between liquor license locations to reduce the location radius for off-sale wine only licensed locations.
And I just wanted to share that that's an example of when you pass about a $650 million budget after months and months of discussion and deliberations and push-pull and what have you. And then Ms. Moore goes on to item number 35, just like nothing happened. So it's a big deal. Thanks, folks, for your work on this. And as I said, when we work together, we get through this. And what happens in a couple weeks? We start 2022 with our policy sessions and conversations with our stakeholders. And so I look forward to the song that never ends, the budget process, as we complete this year and go on to the next one. But I didn't want it to just skate by without without an opportunity to have an imaginary glitter gun going off in all of your apartments and homes. So there we are. Congratulations, folks. We have passed a 2021 budget. Sorry, Sherry.
Would you like me to read the item again?
Yes, please do.
Okay. Item 35 is the final adoption of ordinance 20-29, amending chapter 409 of the legislative code pertaining to the distance restriction between liquor license locations to reduce the location radius for off-sale wine only licensed locations.
All right, and this is in front of us for final adoption. Are there comments before we go to a vote? Ms. Prince?
Yes. Not unlike the budget, my office has been coordinating with DSI staff since April to bring forward this amendment that is urgently needed to help small businesses impacted by COVID. The events of the past couple of days have led me to, I actually got an email today from someone who had a very creative idea. I want to look at a couple of options and in hopes for some kind of possible compromise. And so I am moving a 1-week layover, and I hope my colleagues can support me on that.
Great. Ms. Yang.
Thanks. I was going to comment on where I am on this, but I will support the layover.
Okay, so there's been a motion for a layover. There's some support for that motion. Any other conversation around Ms. Prince's request for a 1-week layover to entertain a creative idea? All right, seeing none, the roll call request from Ms. Prince. Roll call.
Tolbert,
Yes.
Naker,
Aye.
Tao,
Aye.
Prince,
Aye.
Jalali,
Aye.
Yang,
Aye.
Council President Brenmoen.
Aye.
7 in favor, no one opposed. The ordinance is laid over to December 16th. Item number 36, second reading of ordinance 20-37, creating chapter 194 of the legislative code entitled Smoking Policy Disclosure to require the completion of a smoking sale disclosure report for sale of units within a common interest community. This ordinance is laid over to December 16th for third reading public hearing. Item 37, public hearing of ordinance 20-35, granting the application of Keith Schroeder to rezone the property at 981 Fuller Avenue from R4 Single Family Residential to T2 Traditional Neighborhood and amending Chapter 60 of the Legislative Code pertaining to the zoning map.
And Mr. Tao, were you looking for a staff report on this item?
That is correct. I
All
think
right,
Tony's here.
All right. Get a quick staff report.
Yes, I am here. Good afternoon, council members.
Welcome, Mr. Johnson.
Thank you. Okay, so can you guys see my screen?
Yep.
Perfect. So the application that you have before you is a rezoning request from R4 single family to T2 traditional neighborhood at 981 Fuller Avenue. The subject property is a corner store style building at the corner of Fuller and Chatsworth. It's about 2 blocks south from University and 2 blocks east of Lexington Avenue. So this is just a picture to kind of show you what it is. It was historically a corner store, and over time, the commercial uses went away, and it's currently just a one unit apartment building with a vacant first floor. So the property is surrounded by a mix of single family and duplex land uses. If you look up on the map at the red part, about 130 feet away, there's commercial uses on University Avenue. So the property is currently zoned R4. It's surrounded by R4 single family zoning on 3 sides, and then to the north, it's RT1 duplex zoning, and then a little bit further north, there's T2 zoning along University Avenue, which the applicant is requesting. So the subject property was originally constructed in 1909 as a mixed-use structure. In 1922, when the first zoning code was adopted, the subject property was rezoned to B residence. In 1975, when the modern code was adopted, the property was zoned R4 single family. And so now the property owner now wants to reestablish a commercial use in the vacant first floor, and so that's why they're requesting T2 zoning. So in order for the staff and the commission to recommend approval of the rezoning, there are a number of findings that need to be met, such as consistency with the way the area is developed. As I stated, this property, along with most of the neighborhood in Frogtown and Rondo, was developed before we had zoning. And as a result, we see a lot of these types of mixed-use old structures throughout the neighborhood, which are typically near historic streetcar stops. So this subject parcel is near the intersection of University and Lexington, so it's in a transit-rich location, and T2 zoning is consistent with this location. This proposed zoning is also consistent with the comp plan. Policy LU 36 of the 2040 comp plan calls for promoting neighborhoods serving commercial businesses within urban neighborhoods that are compatible with the character and scale of existing residential development. This property is also would be in the Lexington neighborhood node and is consistent with policy LU 31, which calls for investing in neighborhood nodes to achieve development that enables people to meet their daily needs within walking distance and improves equitable access to amenities, retail, and services. It's also consistent with policy 22 of the District 8 plan, which calls for continued efforts to foster minority-owned business startups, retentions, and expansions from within the community. The Planning Commission found that the other findings are met, such as compatibility with surrounding land uses. It doesn't constitute spot zoning, and they met their required petition requirement. So with that, the Planning Commission is recommending approval of the rezoning from R4 to T2 traditional neighborhood at 981 Fuller Avenue. So I'd be happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. It looks like Mr. Tao has a question.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. Did the property owner indicate what type of business will be going in there if this rezoning is approved?
Yeah, so he expressed interest, Council President Brenmo and Councilmember Tao. He expressed interest in doing a retail type business in there, so just like a typical kind of corner store type thing.
And Mr. Johnson, is he leasing that space out, or is he the one that's going to be operating? I'm just curious.
I think his intention is to own and operate the business as well. So he lives on the top floor currently, and basically the space is sitting vacant, and so he wanted to rezone it to have the flexibility to put something in there. And I think his intent is to run the business as well.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Johnson. No more questions.
Thanks.
Any other council members have questions for Mr. Johnson? All right, seeing none. Now this is just the public hearing. So we have had that public hearing online and over the phone. There are entries in the Legistar system on this item. So Mr. Tao would move to close the public hearing. Is there any discussion on that motion? Seeing none, roll call.
Tolbert,
Yes.
Naker,
Aye.
Tao,
Aye.
Prince,
Aye.
Jalali,
Aye.
Yang,
Aye.
Council President Brenmo.
Aye.
7 in favor, no one opposed. The public hearing is closed, and the ordinance is laid over to December 16th for final adoption. Sorry, my pages are sticking. Item 38, Resolution Public Hearing 20-235, approving a 5-year street reconstruction plan for the fiscal years 2021 through 2025 and granting preliminary approval to the issuance of certain general obligation street reconstruction bonds by the city.
And a reminder to folks that we did get a report from Public Works on this item at our budget committee several weeks back. To get an update on the 5-year street reconstruction. And I think, at least in my mind, the biggest takeaway, besides me complaining about some projects getting bumped back, was just a real commitment from this council to dig in on the general obligation street reconstruction bonds and to determine if there's room in our city budget to expand that program because the construction of the complete streets is of benefit to everyone, and the $12.5 million we have allocated to this fund for many, many years now is not going as far as it once was, and we need to look at ways that we can expand that. So that conversation is coming soon to the council in January or February. But I just wanted to remind folks that there was a lot of agreement around getting a better understanding about what the opportunities were there, and recognizing that we were falling too far behind on our reconstruction projects. That said, Mr. Kurtz is here if people have questions on the 5-year street reconstruction plan. And if there are not questions, I will take a motion from Ms. Naker on this item. Looks like there's no questions. So this has been a public hearing. Folks have had an opportunity to submit testimony online and over the phone. So Ms. Naker would move to close the public hearing and approve. Roll call.
Tolbert,
Yes.
Naker,
Aye.
Tao,
Aye.
Prince,
Aye.
Jalali,
Aye.
Yang,
Aye.
Council President Brenmoen.
Aye.
7 in favor, no one opposed. The public hearing is closed and the resolution is adopted. Item 39, resolution public hearing 20-266, amending the spending and financing plans for the STAR program.
Right. And we have held a public hearing online and over the phone. And as such, we would, Mr. Tolbert would move to close the public hearing and approve. Any discussion on that motion? Seeing none, roll call.
Tolbert,
Yes.
Naker,
Aye.
Tao,
Aye.
Prince,
Aye.
Jalali,
Aye.
Yang,
Aye.
Council President Brenmoen.
Aye.
7 in favor, no one opposed. The public hearing is closed and the resolution is adopted. Item 40, resolution public hearing 20-272, approving the Energy Park Utility Company franchise rates.
And we have held a public hearing online and over the phone. As such, Ms. Jalali moves to close the public hearing and approve. Any discussion on that motion? Seeing none, roll call.
Tolbert,
Yes.
Naker,
Aye.
Tao,
Aye.
Prince,
Aye.
Jalali,
Aye.
Yang,
Aye.
Council President Brenmoen.
Aye.
7 in favor, no one opposed. The public hearing is closed and the resolution is adopted. Item 41, resolution public hearing 20-275, amending the financing and spending plans in the general government account in the amount of $406,569 for the funding received from the State of Minnesota Department of Human Services Emergency Services Program COVID-19 response funds.
Right, and I know staff are here if we have questions, but I will state that we have held a public hearing online and over the phone, and as such, Ms. Yang would move to close the public hearing and approve. Any discussion? Seeing none, roll call.
Tolbert,
Yes.
Naker,
Aye.
Tao,
Aye.
Prince,
Aye.
Jalali,
Aye.
Yang,
Aye.
Council President Brenmoen.
Aye.
7 in favor, no one opposed. The public hearing is closed and the resolution is adopted. Item 42, resolution public hearing 20-278, authorizing the city to accept $6,061,828 in CDBG CB funds and $7,992,924 in ESG CB funds related to CARES Act grants from the United States Department of Housing and Urban Development, and amending the 2020 budget to incorporate these funds into the federal grant budget.
And on this item, we do have staff available to answer questions. I will also say that the intention of the council is this is a vote to authorize the city to accept these grants, not to spend them. So we will continue this conversation, but this step right now is just to accept. And if folks have questions, there is staff available. With that in mind, we have held a public hearing online and over the phone, and Mr. Tolbert would move to close the public hearing and approve. Any discussion on that motion? Ms. Naker.
Thank you, Council President. Just appreciate the clarification that we're just accepting these dollars, and just wanted to add as well, this is a significant amount of money. It's close to $14 million. And I believe our understanding is that we will have to, this will come back to council to allocate those dollars when that time comes as well. So we'll be weighing in on that.
Yep. Thank you for that, for the clarification. I think it's there's a lot of numbers there. It's expansive and worth noting. And I think also it's something that we look forward to digging into further with the PED. All right, so there's been a motion. Roll call.
Tolbert,
Yes.
Naker,
Aye.
Tao,
Aye.
Prince,
Aye.
Jalali,
Aye.
Yang,
Aye.
Council President Brindamon.
Aye.
7 in favor, no one opposed. The public hearing is closed and the resolution is adopted. The legislative hearing officer recommends adoption of the following resolutions as no objections to these recommendations were received. Item 43, RLH FCO 20-147, 2023 Ashland Avenue. Item 44, RLH FCO 20-145, 709 Bedford Street. Item 45, RLH VBR 20-74, 1721, 1725, and 1729 Carroll Avenue. Item 46, RLH SAO 20-48, 910 Clear Avenue. Item 49, RLH VBR 20-75, 181 Front Avenue. Item 50, RLH VBR 20-69, 1282 Hague Avenue. Item 52, RLH VO 20-55, 1094 Kent Street. And item 54, RLH VO 20-54, 777 6th Street East. And the motion would be to adopt these items.
All right, so moved by Ms. Prince. Any discussion on that motion? Seeing none, roll call.
Tolbert,
Yes.
Naker,
Aye.
Tao,
Aye.
Prince,
Aye.
Jalali,
Aye.
Yang,
Aye.
Council President Brindamon.
Aye.
7 in favor, no one opposed. The public hearings are closed and the resolutions are adopted. For the following item, the legislative hearing officer's recommendation is to refer to legislative hearing on January 12th. Item 47, RLH RR 20-45, 2531 Edgecombe Road. And the motion is to refer to legislative hearing on January 12th.
All right, so moved by Mr. Tolbert. Any discussion on that motion? Seeing none, roll call.
Tolbert,
Yes.
Naker,
Aye.
Tao,
Aye.
Prince,
Aye.
Jalali,
Aye.
Yang,
Aye.
Council President Brindamon.
Aye.
7 in favor, no one opposed. The resolution is referred to the January 12th legislative hearing. For the following item, the legislative hearing officer's recommendation is to refer to legislative hearing to January 19th, 2021. Item 51, RLH VBR 20-71, 1823 Hewitt Avenue. And again, the motion is to refer to legislative hearing on January 19th.
So moved by Ms. Jalali. Any discussion on that motion? Seeing none, roll call.
Tolbert,
Yes.
Naker,
Aye.
Tao,
Aye.
Prince,
Aye.
Jalali,
Aye.
Yang,
Aye.
Council President Brindamon.
Aye.
7 in favor, no one opposed. The resolution is referred to the January 19th legislative hearing. For the following item, the legislative hearing officer's recommendation is to continue the public hearing to January 13th. Item 48, RLH SAO 20-24, 2233 Energy Park Drive. And again, the motion is to actually amend and continue the public hearing to January 13th.
All right, so moved by Ms. Jalali. Any discussion on that motion? Seeing none, roll call.
Tolbert,
Yes.
Naker,
Aye.
Tao,
Aye.
Prince,
Aye.
Jalali,
Aye.
Yang,
Aye.
Council President Brindamon.
Aye.
7 in favor, no one opposed. The resolution is amended and the public hearing is continued to January 13th. For the following item, the legislative hearing officer's recommendation is contested and additional testimony from the appellant is in the record. It's item 53, RLH VBR 20-72, 609 Sims Avenue. I believe there's a staff report.
There is indeed.
All right, welcome, Ms. Mormont.
Thank you. Good evening, council members.
In legislative hearings, we always start out by telling a person before the hearing is even conducted that if you're okay with the recommendation that comes at the end of the hearing, the council is going to go with that without discussion. But if you're not okay with the recommendation that's forthcoming from the hearing, you can definitely submit additional testimony and documents to the council, and they could look at things differently than I have in developing a recommendation. In this particular case at 609 Sims, the appellant did look at things differently and has submitted a letter that's been in your record for a week. And then you also got a voicemail transcribed and added today with, about another paragraph's worth of information. So you do have that additional testimony, which I know you're aware of, in your record. And I just wanted to give you a little bit of background because it is a contested recommendation. This story has 2 chapters. The one right now is chapter 2 that's in front of you, and that is talking about this being a registered vacant building, a category 2 registered vacant building. Chapter 1 happened in September and October when the fire certificate of occupancy was revoked. That was an appealed revocation of the certificate. An extension was granted to come into compliance with the orders. The owner did have the opportunity to develop a work plan to do that. He bought the property, he indicated, mid-June of 2020, and indicated that the previous owner, and this is a duplex with a carriage house, so it's 3 units. The previous owner of this property didn't disclose to him that there were fire C of O orders out there, and this process had been going on for several months with the previous owner. And in fact, 2 weeks before the building closed, the previous owner had met the inspector on site. What the purchaser, the appellant, did have was a truth and sale of housing report that also included much the same information that came out in the inspection report. So the Truth and Sale of Housing, or TISH report, did come up in the legislative hearing as being consistent with or duplicating the kinds of information that one would have received had it been disclosed. And so we worked through that, came up with the plan. The owner bought the house to empty it, to rehab it, and to have it reoccupied. That was his plan with this property. And indeed, he did not believe that he would be able to execute the repairs that were necessary while the property was occupied. And so that was part of what he was looking for an extension for, was to rehouse or have those tenants leave. And he had one by one of the people in those units did end up moving out. So when November 2nd came, and that was the extension that the council gave, so you gave another couple of months for those orders to be dealt with. The appellant was a no-show for the inspection. The inspector did what they do, knocked on the doors, waited a little while, and nobody came. So at that point, he determined, after walking around looking at things and having no one to talk to, that there wasn't compliance with the orders and that the units did appear empty and vacated to him. So he referred the property to the vacant buildings program. The appeal that you're looking at today is about that referral to the vacant building program. The basis for the decision to send it to the vacant building program was the appearance that the units were emptied and that there was this long-term non-compliance with the orders. The owner in the hearing did say, yes, this is an empty building now, but he thinks that it should only be subject to the orders for the reinstating a fire C of O. So you already gave me a list of 36 things to do. If I do those 36 things, I should be able to put tenants back in here. What city code says is, once you get to this point, Chapter 43 kicks in, you have major code violations, and you need to do a code compliance to bring it into minimum code compliance, not just have a fire C of O. And that is really what's under dispute today, is what is the measure that needs to be used before the property can be reoccupied. I will tell you that when I look at these cases, I look at the breadth and depth, if you will, of the violations that we're talking about. And we do have not enough severity that would justify a condemnation as unfit for human habitation. But we do have, I think, violations that meet the definition within Chapter 43, the vacant building chapter of the legislative code. And in that case, it talks about unoccupied and has multiple housing or building code violations. And I think this is exactly that case where there's multiple, and I would say major. And the breadth of it is that there are property maintenance, fire code, building code, mechanical code, plumbing, and electrical code problems going on there. So from my perspective, it would be not as simple as saying, pull a building permit and you can take care of it. There's a lot of permits that need to be pulled, and these things are red flags to me that there are deeper problems going on at the structure. Within the owner's letter, and you have his testimony in front of you, but to summarize, he was believing that the orders that he saw were based on the truth and sale of housing, and that the determination to make it a Category 2 is based on that. That isn't something that inspectors look at. They did specifically bring it up in the hearing to say that those were mutually reinforcing inspection documents, but not that you enforce on a private inspector's notes. The inspection report that was used to make that determination was the fire C of O revocation from September 24th of 2020. The owner was also communicating that, let's see here, since he had just purchased the property, he thought that he should have had more time, and he felt that he was being treated unfairly and that the previous owner had not been held to the same standard as he had. Indeed, the last fire certificate of occupancy was issued in 2012. At which point it was determined to be a Class A property, which is pretty good. I mean, so it got a very long period of time between that and the present. From all appearances, it didn't have much investment in that time period, and it went from being a Class A to a Class D property when it was initially inspected at the beginning of this year. So a lot happened, a lot not good happened in that intervening time. Additionally, he argued that the COVID made it difficult, if not impossible, for him to access the units to do the necessary repairs. And there are definitely safety precautions that can be put into place to make repairs to properties, and the existence of the governor's orders does not relieve the property owner of the responsibility to maintain the property in a safe manner for the people living there. And so the fire inspection staff did explain, as they would in a landlord training class, how those policies work together, but the property does need to be maintained. He did mention specifically, and I will speak to that he was frustrated that his hearing, which was originally scheduled for November 17th, had to be rescheduled. Indeed, his hearing was scheduled for 2:30 on that day, and it was rescheduled because of my schedule. I needed to, at 3 o'clock, be in a district court hearing on another property in front of you, 1544 Beach. You might recall that you saw that several times in front of you. So when hearings ran long that day, I needed to reschedule to the following week. So he did have a 1 week wait from when his hearing was originally scheduled, and we didn't know until the last minute that that was going to happen. So I know that's frustrating, and that isn't the way we normally do business. I can't remember the last time if that ever happened, but it did. I would lastly, he does say specifically that he feels that he is a victim in this situation. He became a victim of circumstances and miscommunications. He goes on to talk about what steps he thinks he can take, which is all fine. I don't think that's the situation in this particular case. I think that we're looking simply at different agendas or mandates that one would follow if one is an investor trying to empty and rehab and improve the value of a property versus an enforcement agency trying to maintain minimum standards for health and habitation. So that is the perspective that I give you. I know that you have a big letter in front of you. I talked with Ms. Yang about this earlier, and if you have any questions, I know it was a long staff report. The long and the short of it is I would recommend you deny the appeal, that this should be a Category 2 registered vacant building, and to waive the vacant building fee for 90 days to give him a chance to get the work done and spend that money towards doing the work rather than towards the fee if he can manage that. Sorry for the long report, but it was a complicated case.
And certainly helpful to look at the pictures and the file. Any questions from Ms. Mormond? Ms. Yang.
Thanks, Council President. Thank you, Marcia, for the briefing here. It was really helpful. And I did get to take a look at the letter and all of the attachments and photos. And I have two questions. The first one is, was the owner referred to the rental rehab program?
I can check the minutes on that. Okay. Usually we do make that kind of a referral, but he did not mention financing as being a problem in accomplishing the work, rather logistics. So I gathered he had the money set aside and was ready to spend it, but not immediately. So
if you can double check, that'd be great. Mm-hmm. And then in response to their statement about not being able to maintain their home because of the executive order, I'm just wondering if you know of any barriers they might have had, maybe as like an individual or other factors, basically resulting in them not being able to maintain their home. I'm also curious, like, if for other properties, have other homeowners been able to keep up their home during this time as well? Or is that something that is basically being paused on because of the executive order?
This is a rental property. And so what would be in play in this particular case would be the tenant's willingness to allow access to their property for the work to happen, and the ability to get contractors in to do the work. This is a matter of taking safety precautions then, and for everybody involved, and doing scheduling that would respect everybody's safety in this. And with a sufficient time and organization, we have consistently seen repairs can get done and these issues addressed. In terms of financing, most certainly COVID has had an impact on people's ability to fund repairs in their own personal homes, and that is something that we have come across. And I have certainly worked with landlords, and you have seen many records in front of you also about landlords who have issues and where referrals were made to the rental rehab program, or other kinds of things have been undertaken where we do like staggered work plans, where the most important life safety issues need to be addressed in this short time period. And we figure out longer term schedules for the other things so that there isn't a big bill due presently. So that is my short answer. But again, it was the landlord's perspective that he simply thought that the work needed to have the units emptied to accomplish it. For example, having an electrician come in, having the sheetrocking was an example that he brought up, that he didn't think that he could re-sheetrock sections of the apartment with somebody living in it. I don't think that that's the case. I have seen many situations where repairs of this nature have been done while units have been occupied. Repair, yes. If you're totally rehabbing it and making it a shiny new penny, that is a different situation than straight up habitability for somebody who's in there at that moment. I think there was an elderly woman who was in there, and she had been there from 1989 or so, and that she felt particularly uncomfortable, but she did end up leaving, moving out. So
So the house is vacated now from what you shared earlier.
Yes, it has been vacated. It was not because the city vacated it. It was because the landlord undertook to have that done.
Okay. I have a couple of follow-ups, Council President. Do you need time to verify whether they, needed assistance? It's like the program I mentioned earlier.
We can reach out and provide that referral. Having the financing to do the repairs doesn't impact the decision that's in front of you today, but it would, we can definitely provide that information, make sure he's aware of the rental rehab program, that we do that all the time. And so definitely able to do that and send the appropriate information.
Did you have more follow-up questions, Ms. Yang?
No.
Okay. And I just sometimes I'm surprised when I see properties like this that have been in our CFO program. I mean, the kind of disrepair is like rotted wood. That did not happen during COVID. It's been happening over a long extended period of time. I would just say that I personally would be in support of the recommendation of the legislative hearing officer, because it instead of it gives the opportunity, it puts the property into the C of O, which is going to and the category 2 C of O, which will require a full inspection and check off before it can get rented again, which I think is really important, but also focuses the money on the repairs as opposed to paying for the vacant building fee. But this is definitely a property that needs to be more than just flipped. There's a lot of repair there just based on what I'm able to see. And I think it's unfortunate that people were displaced in this situation. Hopefully it does mean that we'll be bringing online safer residences for people in the not too distant future. But I do think it's important that we keep an eye on it because it looks like a lot of work needs to be done. But I would support the recommendation of the legislative hearing officer for whatever it's worth. I see Ms. Prince has a hand up.
Yeah, Ms. Mormon, I'm confused. The statement from the property owner says that he did receive, he purchased a home in June. He did receive an order to vacate. And I did not think that we were issuing vacate orders during the moratorium. I see that he also got an extension till November 2nd. But if he had an order to vacate, you're saying that they didn't leave because of the order to vacate, they left voluntarily because he asked them to. But isn't that kind of a fine point? If we had issued an order to vacate during the eviction moratorium?
I'm looking for the place in the minutes where he described the situation. If you can just give me a moment, I will.
These are very nuanced. These legislative hearings are very nuanced. Are we concerned about the recommendation of the legislative hearing officer, or concerned about what happens after this decision is made? Because if we need to lay this over, I think we should lay it over rather than try to hash it all out at the table, unless the concern is about what's in front of us to vote. Ms.
Well,
Prince,
I guess I feel like I am concerned that the tenants all had to vacate during the eviction moratorium, and whether or not that's an important point to your recommendation, Ms. Mormon. I really, this raises kind of a red flag for me, because I know we've had properties in my ward where, problem properties where the message is that we're not issuing vacate orders unless it's, uninhabitable. So you can get back to me, I guess, about this if we don't feel that it has any bearing on the hearing officer's recommendation, but it's a troubling fact pattern for me there.
I don't disagree. My question was more, do we want to lay it over and get the answers to the questions before we vote on it, as opposed to, this isn't in my ward. I'm kind of flying blind.
if you like, he did testify in the hearing that he came to arrangements with the tenants whereby they would leave and he wouldn't pursue anything related to non-payment of rent. And so he did specifically say that in the hearing. With respect to an order to vacate, my understanding is that that is an order to vacate related to a revocation we're not going to vacate the premise, but rather it would be referred to the vacant building program. And they would continue to work with the owner and charge excessive consumption fees for getting the building out of the vacant building program and addressing it while it's still occupied. I distinguish that from a case where a building is condemned for unsafe conditions for human habitations, such as the case we saw when there was no heat in the premise, and that being a significant life safety issue. But is there consideration being given? Yeah, the city is not going in for administrative purposes and having people leave. That is not happening right now.
Okay, thank you for that explanation.
So does that satisfy your concerns on that? Because I would be comfortable laying it over. Sometimes these are so nuanced that I think it's worth taking the time. But I'm also trying to distinguish, like, what are we really voting on and what can we do with this going forward? And Ms. Yang.
Thanks. I don't need a layover. I feel good about voting in support of the recommendation with the info that's given. And so my only ask for you, Marcia, would be to reconnect with the property owner about the program and see if they do need that assistance later on.
We will get that information out in the morning.
Great. Thank you.
Thanks for remembering that. Those are always a good connection with our rental properties, is use those resources on the D and C level properties. It helps the neighborhood and the future renters. So thanks for that reminder, Ms. Yang. So there is a motion for the recommendation of the legislative hearing officer by Councilmember Yang. Any discussion on that motion? Seeing none, roll call.
Tolbert.
Yes.
Naker.
Aye.
Tao.
Aye.
Prince.
Aye.
Jalali.
Aye.
Yang.
Aye.
Council President Brenmoen.
Aye.
7 in favor, no one opposed. The public hearing is closed and the resolution is adopted. For the following item, the legislative hearing officer's recommendation is contested and additional testimony from the appellant is in the record. Item 55, RLH RR 20-32, 901 York Avenue.
And we have a staff report.
A brief one. We did get some of the information that we were looking for from the owner, Mr. Scott Redinger. He was to have provided by December 1st preliminary work plans and evidence of the ability to execute them financially. He did not provide any of that. And we reached out to him yesterday to confirm that he wasn't going to be doing that and ask if he wanted to testify. And he said, "Oh, did you mean, I didn't realize." And well, we send letters, but okay. He got some of the information to us today, and I would say it makes sense, given that we have some of the information we're looking for, to look at it again in legislative hearing and see if the rest can't be developed. This is a very serious decision, and I would like to make sure that we look at every possible scenario for him to get this house rehabilitated and back in use.
All right. So the recommendation again was?
Refer to legislative hearing December 22nd.
Okay. And whose ward is that in?
This is Ms. Yang's ward as well.
All right. So questions or comments, Ms. Yang? So Ms. Yang moves the recommendation of the legislative hearing officer. Any discussion on that motion? Seeing none, roll call.
Tolbert.
Yes.
Naker.
Aye.
Tao.
Aye.
Prince.
Aye.
Jalali.
Aye.
Yang.
Aye.
Council President Brenmoen.
Aye.
7 in favor, no one opposed. The item is referred to the December 22nd legislative hearing.
Thank you.
And that's
Great.
the end.
All right. So Um, all right, so we've reached the end of our council, and that's the end. We've reached the end of our council agenda here for today. I want to just remind council colleagues that next week we'll hold, we have two things. One is we will get an end of year report from the administration, and that may be the appropriate time to share some thoughts on the year in review. The budget is one thing, but there's been certainly lots of other work that's happened. Think about what you'd like to share at that time. You don't have to, but just that opportunity if folks would like to do that. And also in concert with an end of the year summary and some updates on care spending, in an effort to also make sure that we're sharing the positive with our community. There's updates on our housing opportunity, on work to get folks who are experiencing homelessness into shelter. And I think we'll get that information at our council meeting as well, so that the greater public can understand how things are coming together and the work that has taken place to get there, and opportunities for them also to weigh in or to help in a way that adds up to getting people into shelter and housing, which I think is ultimately our goal. So all that is coming in front of us next week. But before we adjourn, I would just like to offer folks, if they have news from the wards or things they'd like to share, we'll do that quick. Ms. Prince.
Thank you, Council President. Polly Hines in my office found this wonderful good news from Minnesota Public Radio that Northern Lights are going to be visible all across Minnesota tonight and into tomorrow morning. So it actually says Southern Minnesota has, because of cloud cover, is going to have the best views. But in any event, go to the NPR website and read up on it, because that is a phenomenal array. It can be, and very exciting. So that's my good news. We passed the budget and the Northern Lights have appeared. It's a cosmic thing.
It's our natural glitter cannon. That's great. And there was, this information is great, and hopefully the clouds will clear up and we will get to see a little bit of it. If it does appear, it is phenomenally beautiful and would be a great way to celebrate a big day here. Any other news from the wards before we adjourn? All right, it does not appear that we have any. So seeing nothing else to come before us this evening, we are adjourned. Thank you.